chose human sciences. While doing the masters, I began work with Coed Cymru. We create and manage woodlands with farmers in Wales that are like a part of existing farms. And my role within that is the Woodland Carbon Code. So when we plant new woodlands, we measure how much carbon the trees take in as they grow, and then we can verify that, and the farmers have carbon credits that they can choose what to do with. So I do that role 3 days a week, and then 2 days a week I've been a Dyfi Biosphere Climate Officer for Eco Dyfi. So that's working with communities on climate action that benefit them. For example, we've made a community e-bike scheme. We support people to increase their home energy efficiency. And then that role has evolved because funding has evolved over the last year. So now most of my time with that is supporting a social prescribing project relating to outdoor health. So people are referred by a GP or self-referred to join an outdoor health program to enhance their well-being. So yeah, I dabble in many different fields still, and I love that. And I'm grateful to Human Sciences for supporting me in that.
Fantastic, thank you. And Surya, what was your journey like? It's really fascinating what you told me earlier.
So after graduating from Human Sciences, I went on to do my Masters. My Masters was directly informed by a module that I studied at prelims, actually in my first year, which was actually a split between demography and then human geography. So I went on to do a Master's in Migration Diaspora Studies, which was informed by the Human Geography module in year 1. I was really interested in migration studies. I felt there were a lot of things that I could add, research as well. And then after my Master's, I went straight on to do a PhD in Human Geography as well. So actually what I studied in first year directly informed what I went on to do my PhD research in, and now I've joined the geography department at Oxford as a cultural geography lecturer. So actually, Human Sciences is actually and what we did in first year has sort of been a constant threading through my career trajectory post Human Sciences. And I've also been involved in policy work quite a bit, wanting to recenter the voices and the experiences of those at the margins of society, or often at the margins of society, and connecting them at the heart of Westminster, at the heart of Parliament. Often policy is quite, or can be quite decentered or detached from the people that it's meant to serve. So I do a lot of anthropological research to connect that directly and inform policymakers on different issues, particularly around equality.
Fantastic. And Paddy, well, you've had a very compressed period since graduating in 2020. So talk about how you found Human Sciences and how that's propelled you through into your first job.
Yeah, so I actually was thinking this earlier during the first panel, but I first came across Human Sciences because of the unique summer school system, which Human Sciences is amazingly part of, because it's a summer school offered to state school pupils, which it definitely doesn't offer all the topics, but it's great that Human Sciences is on it. I think there's only sort of 15 or 20 courses that you can do. And I saw this course and I was really interested in biology. In sixth form, I was really interested in history. I've always sort of been torn between different disciplines, and I saw this course and thought, maybe they can both work together, and came and spent a week in here as a 17-year-old and had lectures from Piers and I, and Clive, I think, and Amanda, I think, and all the others. And I thought, wow, this is a nice little building. I like it. I could see myself here, and was lucky enough to get a place. And as I'm sure we all love, the diversity of options and avenues that you could go down during the degree. And I really enjoyed particularly specializing in conservation and biological conservation and human-animal relationships and those sort of areas. And I remember being asked about why Human Sciences when I was talking about conservation in my interview with Christian Capelli back in 2017. why don't you just go and study biology if you're interested in animals? And I was, good question. They'll think about it, well, so you can learn about the animals and you can learn about the difficulties that they're experiencing, but if you don't understand the people that are living near these animals, or the people that have the power in the area and the way that they work, then you can't do anything about it. So you really need to be able to understand the people to be able to do anything about the problems that we learn about on this course. So I've always been interested in biological conservation, but also about having some sort of impact with that. And how you do that is a question that all students probably wonder about. You learn about all these amazing things, but what can I actually do about it? What can one person do about it? And I was doing lots of different careers, maybe just a conservationist or some sort of ecological consultant or something. And I really didn't know. And I just was enjoying my time at university, enjoying lots of different areas of the course, and enjoyed random South and Southern Africa political paper in third year, which was amazing, but not at all what I was particularly thought I was interested, but was the best thing that I think I learned at uni. Is so interesting. But came across an internship that Oxford have an amazing internship program for their current undergraduates, and happened to be an internship offered by Vanessa's company, making wildlife documentaries and thinking about the way that you can have impact, and talking about soft power earlier, the soft power that someone like Vanessa has probably had in her career, working on programs like Planet Earth, which, correct me if I'm wrong, have been watched by over 1 billion people. Talk about soft power. So I saw this internship, and I'd never really considered TV, wildlife TV, as a potential option. I wasn't a cameraman. I didn't have any editing skills, but I applied. I thought, wow, that looks amazing. And I had my interview, and they said, tell me about something that you've been working on at university recently. And I talked about an essay that I've written recently about animal culture, and how obviously animals have culture. And we've look at all these debates we've had in lectures and things, and they said, oh, well, on this series that we're making, we've got a whole episode about that. And I was like, oh, great, that sounds pretty relevant. And I was lucky to get the job, and I literally started there September after I graduated, and have been there for the 2 years since. And I imagine I might talk about specifically how it's relevant to human sciences in a bit, but that's sort of how I ended up in the world of TV and working under the stewardship of Vanessa.
Great, thank you. So the next area we wanted to look at was the actual relevance of your degree to your current work.
Well, yeah, I suppose my Coed Cymru work, so the woodland carbon verification, I found myself living like in a question that we debated in the conservation aspect of the course, which is like payments for ecosystem services. And that was a debate that we were having during the course, and now I'm in that world. And to be honest, at the time, while studying it, I felt quite ambivalent about the question, because I feel like, I don't want to commodify nature. Like there's so much more to it, a value, and our relationship with it is so much more than that. But at the same time, in the current system, it's like a powerful and practical way, to conserve and enhance and protect what we have. And I feel like I still retain both of those perspectives and work with both of those, and explore and direct our work in ways which are, have social, economic justice at the heart in who we're supporting by doing this. And then my other work with the climate officer role and social prescribing is also really, I feel it's putting into practice the aspects that we learned about in the degree. Like how humans we are so social, and that's integral to like our species, and that's so vital for our well-being, to have positive social interactions with people, and also the benefits of being outside in nature, both being here. I'm happy to sort of see this in action now, things that we learned about in the course.
And is that modifying what you learned? You now want to come back and change the papers and update them?
Yeah, maybe just expand on some things. Yeah.
Fantastic. And obviously anthropology and what you learned in anthropology, you were saying, is a very important part of your work today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think from the multidisciplinary nature of human sciences has been key in my career trajectory post completing the degree. I've continued sort of dabbling in different disciplines, from anthropology to human geography from an academic perspective, but also in the real world perspective as well, in terms of application of what I'm learning, what I'm researching in the real world, and through the structure of society. But also through a methodological perspective, I think human sciences has been really integral to my work. So for example, being able to facilitate, being able to bring communities together, being able to bring different groups of people together has been really key in a lot of my work. So for example, policymakers and academics, it can be quite rigid sort of areas, rigid industries or fields of work, places of work as well. You know what they say about the ivory tower, for example, and parliament as well, but actually deconstructing a lot of these often physical but also imagined workspaces has been really crucial in building conversations for the purpose of social impact, and simplifying those quite sometimes centuries old infrastructure of society. Also from a methodological perspective, just being able to zoom in and zoom out of different social issues has been really crucial, either whether it's my academic work or whether it's my sort of policy activist work. It's been really important to see a small picture, big picture, but also different sides of the same debate. And it also enable others that I'm working with to see an issue from another sort of angle. And that's something that has been absolutely fundamentally informed by the human sciences degree.
That really resonates with me as a filmmaker. So immediately when I started to try and tell stories about the natural world, that sense of how you listen to audiences, but also to the scientific community, and you try and facilitate a communication between them via a film. So that was drawing on that same sort of rigor that I think we learned as part of our degree. And also that idea of zooming in and zooming out, which I tried to translate into a filmic idea when we were working on Planet Earth, because there had been a long history of wonderful ground-based filming of animals. And I watched these shows. I wasn't actually a zoologist. I used to copy all my boyfriend, now husband's essays for that section of the degree. But I watched all these films. I watched all these films and tried to sort of understand this world that David Attenborough had so magically created. And it just felt like, it felt wonderfully connected to the animals, but I was yearning to see the bigger picture. So we looked at finding a piece of technology that could put animals in the context of their environment. And I saw a camera gimbal, which was advertised, was not very effective, but it was used in news and for shooting sport. And thought if we could use that to do a pull out, so that you don't just connect to the animal, but you then see the environment in a single shot, it places animals into the environment. So it was very much an application of that zoom in, zoom out that you spoke about. And that became a sort of signature style for that show. And now, as Paddy will know, and he'll talk about, our mission is to try and put humans back into the natural world and return us to our rightful place as part of nature and not separate.
I suppose just how human sciences is relevant to this, and I will talk about the series specifically in a second, but it was interesting earlier we were discussing how or why human sciences hasn't expanded, while there aren't a lot more students. I actually really valued the fact that there are only 33 people in my year, because we could all fit in this room. We all knew each other, we were all friends with each other. None of my friends who did other degrees were that good friends with their course mates from other colleges, whereas we all were as human sciences. And it meant because we were so small, we had such good exposure to tutors. And towards the end of the degree, I actually speaking to people who back in the day used to have one-on-one tutors the whole way through, we had more sort of 2 or 3-on-1. But in third year, when you had your option papers, increasingly it became one-on-one tutorials with intense discussions about very specific things, which I think is an unbelievable training for anyone in terms of being confident to discuss complicated topics that you've only had a few days to, or maybe should have had longer, but you've left it for the last few days, to read up on and find out about, which I'm now a researcher on a documentary where we are covering topics from animal cognition to anthropology to plant sentience to a whole variety of other areas. And I will be tasked with finding a story in an area that I don't necessarily know much about, have a few days to read up on it, have to email the top experts on it in the world, have a Zoom call with them one-on-one, try and understand what they are saying about this story, how it can be translated into a visual story on screen, and then get my head around that, condense it, and pitch that to my director, executives or anything, and try and work out how that can be placed in an episode, just like how can that paragraph go into an essay. So I literally don't think I could do a job that is more relevant to running between a sociology lecture to a physiology lecture, understanding it all, trying to get it down in an essay, trying to consolidate it. And now I do that for a job, which is wonderful. But specifically, my series is called Sentient, and it's quite a big series that we're making for the next few years. And it's all about how humans are animals. We have potentially forgotten that. We are not, there is no them and us. It's the sort of tagline. And it's all about how areas of cognition that we used to think were human specific, human uniqueness, this idea that humans are better than all the other animals around us. Undoubtedly we are in certain aspects, but in a lot of ways we've ignored that. And maybe there's a bit of rebalancing that needs to be done. And hopefully by doing that, by showing stories of humans alongside animals doing exactly the same things, showing the same emotions, showing the same cognitive abilities, perhaps we will encourage a greater conservation ethic in the viewers, hopefully. And there is potential to make quite a powerful story. And so hopefully my skills of research and distilling information are, I'm part of a very big team, I'm a very small player in it, but I can contribute hopefully in some way. And it's amazing to be able to have the skills that we've all had in training in different areas to be able to consolidate this and bring science to the table and then learn from the experts, such as Vanessa, such as executives in New York who are working with, who are amazing filmmakers, how to tell that story and how to make people care and do things about that. And so I'm, indebted to the company and the opportunities that I have, and hopefully can try and make a really great program. I do have the promo video. Unfortunately, we can't play it during the live recording for copyright reasons, but I might be able to play it at the end if we have time, if there's any desire. Vanessa made that, so I can't really claim any responsibility.
Brilliant. Freya, we were talking about how you spoke profoundly on our Zoom call about how human sciences is a sort of recipe toolkit for life more generally. And I'd love you to share that with the audience.
Yeah, I can't remember exactly what I said then, but yeah, I find it relevant to every aspect of life, and it's really, inspiring and feeds many aspects of life, of my life. I suppose really broadly kind of feeding the answering of the question that we're all living of like, how do I want to be a human? How do I best make the most of my human life? I think studying things like anthropology opens up the options for us. There's so many other ways of understanding the world or understanding a situation, so many different meanings and ways of living and thinking. So yeah, that's I think really valuable.
When you look out at the communities you interact with, and you're at the front line of dealing with the most important crisis our species has ever faced, and you're trying to find solutions every day, does your degree feel more or less relevant?
Yes, so relevant. Yeah, because things like the climate crisis, or enacting any of the solutions that we have in our toolkit, I suppose understanding that they're all done through human systems and through human decision making, and that are kind of social and political systems. Like, for example, with moving to zero carbon, that we have the technology to do that, and we have the technology, we have the ecology that we need for a sustainable future. But the means of getting there are through, you know, human decision making and human relationships, and that's true of the global and national level as well as at the community level. You know, I work with communities, and you know, human relationships and decision making processes and good facilitation is so important. And I think that came up a lot in the degree, and feeds my
Yes, and going back to, you know, the comment that was made in the previous panel about why perhaps there haven't been or hasn't been a human scientist who's come at the end. You know, do we value enough the listening skills, that we listened intently? I mean, I like Paddy enjoyed listening to people who I felt more diverse than on many other degrees. I met people from different backgrounds and cultures, and you know, because I sat and had lectures occasionally with the zoology department, I got to know zoologists, so I was able to see the world through their eyes and through other people's eyes, and facilitating those conversations are vital. And that's what, I mean, your work absolutely exemplifies that deep listening, breaking down those barriers.
Yeah, one thing that really frustrated me, and which sort of allowed me to enter the work and begin the work that I'm currently doing, is the way in which problems at lived experience level, at the very micro levels of society in marginalized communities. For example, the community that I come from and I was born and raised in, East Birmingham, lots of deprivation, and poverty, and high school meal rates, etc. By the time a policy or even research as an anthropologist would be able to maybe conduct field work, write a paper or a book about it, it will probably be 10 or 15 years on. And by the time that particular piece of work would then get to a policymaker or particular parliamentarian, that community which inspired the ethnographic fieldwork to begin with has probably deteriorated, moved, changed in so many different ways that the book, even though, or that academic research, even though it's amazing and really informative to the discipline, the policy it would then inspire or go on to inspire, hypothetically, would more than likely be no longer relevant to the nature of the community when it comes back full circle. So that was my frustration, because I come from a community like that. And that is my upbringing and my background. And we need, and people all across the country need policy that has a change as soon as possible, as opposed to sort of relying on research that will take, you know, so long to get the funding, from the funding to the actual research, and from the research to ethics, etc. So there's so much protocol, so much structure involved in this. How do we reduce that gap? That's a fundamental problem that I'm grappling with. I've been grappling with since leaving, since finishing the degree, is how do we reduce the gap between the social problem that we have and the policy response? And that's where we need research, or academic or anthropological research, to connect with policymakers to reduce the gap. And that's fundamentally applies to all of the work that always at the heart of, try to be at the heart of all of the work and endeavours that I'm involved in.
It's really interesting. I see a really interesting parallel with, we've been invited as a company to work with the UN on an initiative called the Resilience Frontiers Initiative, which is about how we basically communicate the very critical and important stories of our time to broad audiences and affect climate action. And one of the biggest things that we're realizing is the voices of the indigenous people that live with nature are there's a similarity in that those voices, by the time they're documented, often those people have been sometimes murdered, moved on, their forests have been removed, it's too late. And that voice is so vital to bring to policy level. And as a filmmaker, what I'm trying to do, and I was saying earlier, I sit on this board that's absolutely terrifying with the top data scientists and climate scientists and science fiction writers and filmmakers and a very diverse group. And I sit there and someone said to me, oh, you seem to be able to talk to the psychologist and the climate scientist and the science fiction writer. And I went, yes, because that was my degree. I'm not a filmmaker on this board, I'm a human scientist again, which is really exciting. But I think what we can offer uniquely is there is an urgency at the moment on our planet around massive issues of social injustice and biodiversity collapse and climate crisis. And somehow we have to get the voices in at policy level, and we need to do that more quickly. So I think we in this room have the tools, and that's something we must put into action as much as possible. I think what's really exciting is these three young people around me are kind of living that right now. Paddy.
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, well, hopefully. I mean, I think we all agree on. I don't think anyone. We've all have a perspective of the world that is incredibly well-rounded, and I would like to think a positive way for humanity to go in the future. But as we've discussed, it's how that view is portrayed, or how how we move forward with those ideas. And we hope that we are. I hope that human scientists become more than diplomats' wives, or and are able to use those skills and make the impact that we probably all want to make through policy or through activism or media. There's a lot of I mean, that's the beauty of it. My friends, I graduated 2 years ago, and my friends have already got the most diverse, interesting jobs in all different aspects, and and that's even in COVID times. It's amazing how equipped we all are. I think human sciences genuinely does equip you incredibly well to find a job in an interesting field. And just listening to the panel earlier, I was like, wow, human sciences do really interesting things. I'm so glad that I've tried to find a job myself that I'm actually interested in, rather than just doing a job that pays well, or I've wanted to take my learnings and my passions from the degree into my workplace, because it's a long career if you're not doing something you don't enjoy. I imagine I'm 2 years in, so maybe. Yeah.
Should we throw it open to the floor? Any questions or comments?
I've loved meeting more human scientists today, and I've been really impressed by all of the previous panel and this panel. But I am just wondering to what extent human sciences teaches us those skills of linking concepts, zooming in and out, big picture detail, facilitating conversations and bringing people together, and to what extent it's just particularly good at recruiting people who are like that naturally. Because every single person I meet, no matter how young or old they are, just seems to have some incredible natural qualities to be able to kind of problem solve and be hugely empathic and really good communication skills. So yeah, I'm just questioning that. I'd be interested to know your thoughts.
Were you all like that? It sounds like you certainly were. You talked about it from youth, but do you feel that was there in you and the degree amplified it, or did you learn it as a methodology? I'm interested. I mean, there was a comment in the previous panel about I did split arts and sciences and was a complete nightmare for my grammar school, because they were like, we can't facilitate that in the curriculum at all. But so I'm interested, were you interdisciplinary at sort of 16 to 18 already?
I certainly was. I was always split between history and biology, really, as my two main passions. But I think in terms of the interest and drawing together opinions, I used to want to be Jeremy Paxman. I used to want to interview people and find out what they had to say. And in some ways, that's what I enjoyed most about university. I always enjoyed turning tutorials around and asking questions of the tutors rather than having to answer them myself. Actually seemed to work quite well. And so I was actually flicking through a few old essays on the train down yesterday, and a few of the comments were like, "You've clearly distilled the information well, but what do you think?" And so I've always enjoyed finding things out myself. And amazingly, the series that we're working on, we're potentially going to be interviewing lots of scientists and getting them, talking about their personal experience with the animals. And I'm really looking forward to trying to interview some of these people about the amazing experiences they've had. So I think for me personally, I've always been interested in finding stuff out.
So in a way, human sciences is almost validating and honing some pre-existing
Quite possibly.
skills.
And giving me the ability to talk to a diverse set of people, perhaps, maybe.
Surya, were you always, is that the way you thought?
I think so. I think there's some merit in that sort of view. However, I think if it wasn't for the human sciences degree, I probably would not have found the resources or the tools or the medium in order to tap into it and actually use it as a methodology. I think it made me much more self-aware of, like you said, maybe that inherent nature to be facilitating and bringing people together and seeing connections between things and concepts, interlinking things. I do have to credit the degree for bringing it out, I think.
I think it gave me validation to be like that,
Yeah.
because I didn't feel that was the norm. And I didn't seem to be valued, that I would not necessarily always want to speak, but would ask a question.
I can relate to that so
Yeah.
much, and being almost told off and not following your traditional A-level route of 3 sciences or 3 art subjects. Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
Anything to add on that?
I think maybe a part of the degree that honed that somewhat, it had some excellent tutors and the tutorial system of someone taking you on a journey of learning, that through being in that journey you come to some realization yourself about something and then learn it and remember it much better. But I don't think we were trained really in facilitating conversations. I think that's such an important and valuable skill in the world in general for any kind of group decision making, or for getting voices heard, or that everybody's voices are heard, like I'm speaking about. Maybe that could be an extra course. Yeah.
Any other questions?
You described yourself as a filmmaker, but you're also running a pretty big business, Vanessa. And although human sciences is very multidisciplinary, one of the things that I think it certainly didn't prepare me for, I run a business now. My God, I've spent 10 years trying to work out how to run a business. So given that I reckon businesses are probably the entities that have the power to protect the climate more than governments and more than consumers, should we be adding entrepreneurship and the ability to actually affect the world through starting companies to human sciences?
I think that's a brilliant idea. It was such a massive leap for me to believe that I could run a company, but I realized that I was working in a highly patriarchal institution where actually I was trying to bring a voice out as a female. I was one of very few women in the industry, and I was trying to I worked on a series called Land of the Tiger, and I kept trying to put culture into the series and saying we have to recognize and acknowledge that it's remarkable that India has as many tigers as it does, given the size of the population. And shouldn't we maybe look at this was something I learned from my human sciences degree, what is it about the religions that flourish in India today that allows that to happen? And I was constantly trying to get this human sciences voice. And I realized ultimately I had to set my own company up to do this. We have a series called Queens, which is about female power in the natural world, made by a female-led team that's primarily training women in country to represent their own animals and their context. But I had to set up my own company to do it. But, it took me 30 years before I had the courage to do that. And I didn't really have the capital. I didn't really know how to go about it. So I went to female commissioners who were other in their, that's how they describe themselves, to back me. And that's how I launched the company with my husband. So you're right, I wish I'd had that in my education at some point. Very good point.
There's lots of questions.
Just going back to the theme of the soft power, I think we all have more power here than we think, because all your documentaries, when they air on the television, I run a sustainable investment fund, so bringing in the business, but also bringing all the sort of natural stuff together. But when documentaries like yours air, we see more people invest into the fund. So it's like there's this secret human sciences link here that is actually encouraging people into a strategy run by human scientists with the same sorts of themes in
I
it.
need
So,
to chat to you, get some data.
yeah. So we bring together climate change, resource scarcity and population shift, so basically human sciences, and make investable themes out of it. And I do it with another woman, and we used to be just this really very, very marginal little thing on the side of the desk that somehow we were allowed to do, and now it's absolutely taken off. We're like the only fund out there run by two women that's got like high ratings in terms of performance, but also in terms of the ESG rating, which is, I spoke here to my colleague who also works in ESG, that's environment, social and governance, human sciences again. And in a sense, the city is suddenly waking up to the fact that investment isn't just about making money, it's all about all the other factors. And I've been able to be kind of ahead of the thought process through my wonderful education here. But I think if we all did join all those dots between all our careers, probably find we're influencing each other more than we really think.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
Sarah Jane rules the world.
I was just wondering, talking about our different ways of thinking, presumably for all of us, we don't even realise that we think differently to many other people who didn't have this. And it strikes me as very distressing the way our MPs, everybody in political positions, people who make decisions about politics, seem to all come from PPE, economics, politics, and finance, and they do not think in this way, which seems presumably so obvious to all of us. It is a tragedy that we don't have some campaign to make certain that all MPs get to have some kind of level of broader environmental and social education before being allowed to take up positions of power over us. They don't think in this way that we do.
What can we do to address this, Saria?
I totally hear you and have battled with this for many years now. Just as a few brief examples, during my PhD, I worked for a couple of all-party parliamentary groups, which were set up cross-party to bring cross-party MPs together. There's an APPG, if you look at the list, there's an APPG on cats to cricket and everything in between, basically. But the methodology they were using to publish reports to then influence policy was not linked with communities that they were designing the policy for. So I had to recommend focus groups, which were not, believe it or not, in the mindset of these senior MPs and members of the Lords. I could not believe for the life of me. And sometimes I felt, am I thinking differently? Is there something wrong with me? Am I not, should I really put my hand up? I felt like in a situation where, should I really be, nervous to even say something? Because I was in a room with senior figures. Should I be saying something? Surely I was the one who didn't have the correct or ethical opinion, right? During COVID, I was speaking with civil servants from the Department of Education, for example, and they were designing the policy on exam cancellations and grade predictions. And I asked them, and they were doing their Masters in Public Policy at LSE, so they were on sabbatical, doing their MPP, and also working on this urgent policy during COVID. And I said, have you spoken to students? A senior civil servant working directly with government minister at the time, the Secretary of State for Education. No, we haven't. This was a Teams call, and I don't think my disappointment like radiated enough through the screen, but I hope it does today. But I genuinely, and this is as recent as last year, 2021, 2022, and we've really been trying to, and by the way, we're not like the, because of these frustrations, I've then gone on and set up the Equality Act Review, which I share and resonate with you in terms of how do you, when you have such a different way of thinking, you've got to set something up yourself in order to have more of a say and have a bit more leadership in terms of how you can exercise that soft power concept. Because even though we have soft power in certain situations, we're not able to exercise it because of hierarchy, structures, and so forth, so on and so forth. So that's some of the examples I give, but I share your frustrations, and I absolutely agree. I think there should be a broader educational.
And you should be going to politics, and I'm sure people have said that to you. So, I mean, I'm interested because there aren't more people. Apparently, if you do classics, you're better qualified to be in. As people must have said to you, I mean, you very much described yourself as an academic. Invited you or suggested going to politics.
Yes, they have. I have run at a local election level just to sort of get experience, but also to try and influence local policy in Birmingham, which really needs that at this moment in time. But unfortunately, there's a lack of reception or accommodation for different thinkers. And I think human scientists maybe have this knack for thinking differently to others. And also sort of trying to, it's almost like being at school again, where you're trying to fit in again, but in terms of.
So with the local communities, you were seen to think differently. Was that, oh, I see.
Yeah, so and also the structural politics is just probably requires another talk, but one for a different day maybe.
Any more questions?
So a couple of people have mentioned things that they wish they'd learned. I was wondering whether there's anything else on the list that you have found that you wish you had been taught that was missing from the human sciences course that you suddenly came across and went, ah, I wish I knew about that.
For starters, I would say that when I was revising for my finals and since, I wish that I could do parts of the whole degree again, maybe with a bit of a few years of sounds fun out there.
I think they're trying to send us a message.
I was just thinking that this degree is so massive, and inevitably being a student, you're busy, you can't do everything, you can't go to every single lecture. But there's so much learning that we all did, and there was more to do whilst you're at university, but terms are only 8 weeks. You've got 12 essays to write, you've got activities, social lives. I kind of wish that I could do a job for a few years and then maybe go back and, I don't know, re-look at a few things that I have studied already, but re-examine them with the experience that I might have gained. Maybe that is probably just doing a master's, isn't it? But as we discussed, there may not be the master's that represents what I enjoyed about human sciences at the time. But I completely agree about a bit more of a business and economics outlook, because I would say that someone said earlier, we can maintain a sort of vaguely intelligent conversation about a lot of things, but I don't think economics is something that I can maintain an intelligent conversation about. And unfortunately, a lot of the things that we've talked about, it all comes down to economics. And without that grounding, I then sort of shrink back into my shell and go, oh, well, I just know about biology and geography, not money or anything. So some sort of business, money, unfortunately it speaks, doesn't it?
I know that if everyone's happy, I know that we're on a tight timeline. And
I mean, there were a couple of people. David, did you had your hand up at once?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just.
And there was somebody at the back also. You had your hand up. David, why don't you go first?
Yes, thank you. I'm David Moss, and It's probably 40 years since I came up this Banbury Road. This building didn't exist, and the human sciences degree was midway between biological anthropology and social anthropology Institute. And yeah, like coming up here on the train, I was looking at the syllabus, and actually it's similar to the last question. I was quite struck by how similar it was to how it was when I did the degree between 78 and 81. And yet an awful lot has changed. So I suppose the question I was asking, you talk about interdisciplinarity. How have the ideas of interdisciplinarity that are encapsulated in human sciences actually changed?
Wow, I mean, we could have a whole seminar about that. I think, I mean, it's not really for me to speak. I've got colleagues here, and I know Thomas Cousins is online over in 64, who've thought far more deeply about that, and I'm very much on the kind of social end. I think just one sentence. I think simple opposition between biological and social. I think we would like to think that we've gone. I mean, obviously, I think in one sense the opposition is still there, but in another sense, it's possible to transcend it. I think we know so much more. So I think although the structure of the degree may look very similar, I think quite a lot of the things that are taught under those different labels has moved on, and we're very conscious of that and try to move it on. So I won't say more than that, but I think that's. But there was the back.
As a response to the first comment about what are we learning and what are we already sort of equipped with at the end, I thought I could offer a couple of personal perspectives. Very briefly, I'm from Sweden, and so we have a much broader set of subjects that we study in the UK before entering university. And still, when I studied human sciences, I had a feeling of kind of lostness in the first year, where I thought, okay, I'm reading Nature and Science articles about genetics, and then I'm going off to some more or less dusty books about social anthropology, and how do I make this all fit? And then by the time I got to the final year, whatever I thought about, I couldn't imagine thinking about anything without connecting different things. So I think that speaks to the fact that this program offers something really. And to put even further merit to that, I moved on to a master's program that combined 3 different disciplines from 3 different departments. And that was a much more siloed experience. So I think, I think really human sciences does equip us with this interconnected thinking that we all seem to share in this room.
Great. Would it be okay to switch off and show the trailer?
Absolutely, sure. Before we do that, then we will show the trailer, and then you can hear the receptionist next door. We're standing between you and the wine. It was suggested to me that we should, I mean, we've had such wonderful testimonials, as it were, today in both sessions, that, maybe I hope everyone would be willing to kind of, or many people anyway, would be willing to contribute to kind of 1-minute video of what human sciences meant to them, and then we can have a kind of wall of faces on the website, testimonials. I mean, we have 1 or 2 of those, but we don't have enough. But I think, even if it was just everybody in this room, that would be a fantastic kind of message that it would send. So I hope that would be okay. Thank you very much, everybody.
And we all went there
None of us want to go. Because the course. That's the difference.